Okay, so after much fighting, I made some progress. I was able to get this apart, without too much trouble. Um, basically came right apart. Um, I took some video of my wires and what was where. There's a broken, or not a broken wire, but broken coating on the wire that I'm going to have to figure out what to do with. It looks pretty good. This is where the problem was. So, originally, this was on the outside. Okay. So, pop that off. Then I was left with this, which is basically like a seal, a bearing seal. There's no way to get it out. I was prying from inside the hole. Hopefully I didn't mangle up the threads. There's maybe a little bit. I should be able to clean that up though. There was no way to get it out. So I ended up having to just kind of beat on it with a screwdriver. Kind of popped it out there. And once I did that, it came right out. There's the shaft. The problem is I cannot get these bearings out of this casing back here. The rear half of this case. It just would not come out easily. It will not come out no matter what I did. So I'm going to throw the puller on there real quick and hopefully pop that out and then be done. Okay, so I got the puller on. Gonna try and press this out. The shaft should come out with the switch. The problem is the stator, I think I'm calling these the right things, the outside windings is still wired to the switch, which is captured between the bearings and the shaft, between this rear bearing and the shaft of the, I think that's the rotator. I don't know, I'm not a motor guy. It's kind of new territory for me. So once I get this case off, then I can get to that switch and see what we can do to separate those without having to cut any wires. Hopefully I can just pull a screw out on that switch, but we'll see. Okay, bottomed out there. Let's see what's going on. And the problem is my puller is getting stuck in that race, I think. Yeah, inside the bearing it was getting stuck. So we go back to using a little socket. What did I use before? I think I used a 3/8, right? I could use this guy right here. Yeah, that'll work. Alright. Let me get my puller set back up again. Alright. We'll reset. See if we can pop this sucker out. Yeah, it's moving real smooth. There we go. Oh, there goes my ratchet. Okay, let's see. Okay, there's the switch, still connected. I had taken a couple of screws off of it, so I'm going to get this reorganized here. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to call it a night for tonight. I have to find my soldering iron. I don't know where it is right off the top of my head. I think it's out in my shed. But basically what I have to do is I have to unsolder either the switch from the stator or the switch from the capacitor to get it apart. So I think I'm going to do the switch from the capacitor because I may end up just replacing that capacitor anyway, just because it looks kind of nasty. So to be determined, but we've got everything taken apart. So that works kind of smooth, but I gotta mess with it a little bit more. Yeah, but it's looking good. More another day. So since I can't take the wire apart yet, I brought the whole thing, bearing and all, or bearing, stator, everything over to the press. And I'm just gonna press this bearing out so maybe I can get some numbers off of it or something. See if I'm gonna be able to get new ones. I don't want to put too much pressure on that. Okay, if you're going to press these bearings out on the rear case, be aware, maybe you can see it there, there's a retention ring. It goes all the way around. It's actually there's one on the other side too. But conveniently there was this screw hole, so you can tap this ring around until it's past that screw hole, and then you can put a punch in there to push it out of its groove, get a screwdriver in there, and then try and work it loose so you can press that bearing out. So that's what I'm going to try to do now. And there it is. Worked like a charm. So now I should be able to just press that bearing straight out with no problem. I'm still attached to the stator, but at least I'll get the bearing out and we'll be able to see see if there's numbers on it to get replacements. And there it is. Worked like a charm. So now I should be able to just press that bearing straight out with no problem. I'm still attached to the stator, but at least I'll get the bearing out and we'll be able to see see if there's numbers on it to get replacements. So here I got everything over on the press. It's just kind of an awkward setup because of all the bosses that are on the back side of this casting. And that's the way I have to press it out. I can't press it the other way because that retaining ring is still in there. So I'm just using the V block or the V grooves on my press block. I don't know if you can see it in there, but you know, you just got to get it lined up right. It pressed down to the block, so now I just had to adjust it, and let's see if it'll press right out now. Hopefully it will. I don't care if it hits the floor because it's junk. See what we gotta do. Well, part of it fell out. That's not going to work. Hang on. Okay, let's try it again. Now it's going nice and easy. And there goes the bearing. So we've got the bearing, and it looks like maybe two, I don't know if those are bearing caps. Yeah, I think those are caps on the bearing. don't see any numbers. Bummer. I'll have to clean them up and see what we can find. Okay, it's the next day. It's still very cold out. It's about, I think it's like 15 degrees outside here in New Jersey. Lovely. I found a soldering gun. I'm just going to unsolder this terminal so that I can get that wire off. The resistor is going to come with it, unfortunately, but we'll have to tackle that as we go. So I'm going to unsolder that so then I can disconnect the switch from this housing. Alright, so we got that unsoldered. Actually the resistor didn't go very far, so let's see if I can get this pulled through here. Curl this a little bit. And there we go. So now we have the capacitor, stator with the switch still attached to it. Right here. We'll clean that up. Housing. Last thing to do on this is to take out this plastic bar. This is what was holding those terminals. There we go. So we have bare casting that can get cleaned up and painted. Another bare casting. This one has this kind of tin shield kind of driven down into it with drive screws here. Drive screws there, there. At least I think they're drive screws. I don't think they're rivets, because there's nothing on this side. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. I'll probably leave those if I can. We also have down in here a spring nut or a spring washer, I guess. And then this actually looks like the shield for the bearing, the dust shield. So I'll see if I can get that stuff out too. Okay, so I did. This was the dust shield that was in there. It was actually this way. Oops, sorry. It was actually this way underneath, coming up. And I just used a socket and drove it right down through the middle there. Drove that out. Now there's a couple washers in there, it looks like, and if you can see it, there's also a there you go. There's another retention ring in there. Rather than fighting with that ring, I think I can just push these washers out the back side. I'm going to try and do that. We'll see. And as you can see, there's my socket. Just light taps and voila. There's the washer. For my own purposes, I just took this plastic bar, I guess you'd say, off that held the terminals on, and it came off with these little screws. Just note that in the bag there are larger screws that look just like it. It was the smaller screws that were holding that on, not the larger screws. That should just be of note. And there is the motor completely disassembled with all its parts. With the rear casing, this is like some sort of an insulator for the switch. There's the stator, the sheet metal cover that goes around that, the 4 rods that connect the two halves of the case together, the bearing, the rear bearing. There's the rotor with the switch on there, centrifugal switch. The front bearing. There's the pulley, the 4-sheath pulley. The front casing. Back here we have the 2 ends of the capacitor cover. That one has a grommet in it, and then there's the middle of the capacitor casing, and then a couple bags of parts, screws, and a lot of this might be thrown away depending on what comes with the new bearings, but we'll figure it out. It's an adventure.